They forced my little brother to hang from door frames and chug hormone cocktails just to prove he could be fixed into being me. When I finally snapped and asked them why they refused to see him as Eugene, not a project, Mrs. Gilgy narrowed her eyes and said, "We adopted you to show him what real success looks like." I stayed silent. That was 6 months ago. This morning, I found him in a hospital bed with pins through his legs, staring at the ceiling and whispering, "Maybe now I'll be enough." My adoptive parents only took me in so they could use me as a blueprint to rebuild their loser son, Eugene. I figured this out the day they made us stand back to back in the kitchen, Mr. Gilgy measuring the 6-inch height difference with a ruler, while Eugene stared at the floor. "Chase is exactly what Eugene should have been," Mrs. Gilgy said, like Eugene wasn't even there. "But we can fix that. Eugene was everything I wasn't. 5 feet 4 inches, scrawny, drew anime characters during lunch while eating alone. I was 6 feet 1 inch, captain of junior varsity basketball. The kid teachers picked for demonstrations. The Gilgys didn't want another son. They wanted a template. The first week they just observed, took notes on how I walked, how I held my fork, how I laughed. Eugene had to sit next to me at every meal while they pointed out differences. See Chase's posture? Shoulders back. Copy it, Eugene." He'd try, looking like a puppet with tangled strings. By week 2, the copying became mandatory. They dragged Eugene to my barber, showed my school photo. "Exactly like this," Mr. Gilgy demanded. Eugene's long black hair fell away in chunks. With my fade, he looked like a concentration camp prisoner playing dress-up. The height obsession started immediately. Pull-up bars appeared in every doorway overnight. Eugene had to hang from them 20 minutes before each meal to stretch his spine. I'd sneak him food later when his arms were too sore to lift a fork. "Please don't," he'd whisper. "They'll just make me hang longer tomorrow." They enrolled him in my basketball league by force. Eugene couldn't dribble without looking at the ball, flinched when passes came his way. After practice, while I showered, they made him run extra drills until he vomited. "Chase never quits," they'd scream. "Neither will you." The supplements came next. Protein powder, creatine, pills from websites written in broken English. They'd stand over Eugene until he swallowed everything, even when his body rejected it. I started faking taking mine and slipping them to him, pretending we were both following the regimen. Small rebellion, but it helped him keep some pills down. "Why did you adopt me?" I asked Mrs. Gilgy one night. "We saw you at the group home basketball game," she said simply. 6 feet tall at 14, straight A's, everything we wanted Eugene to be. We realized we could have both, a successful son and a project. The measurements became religious rituals. Every Sunday morning, against the kitchen wall, Eugene stayed at 5 feet 4 inches while I hit 6 feet 2 inches. The gap tortured them. They printed articles about growth hormones, limb lengthening surgeries, sketchy clinics in Mexico. Eugene read every word, desperate to please them. I tried to protect him, threw away the worst supplements, deleted browser histories showing illegal procedures, lied about his progress when they weren't looking. But Eugene was drowning in their disappointment, and I was the life raft they kept pushing him toward. Senior year, they found a doctor, not a real doctor, some guy who operated from a warehouse, promised 3 inches minimum. They showed Eugene testimonial videos during dinner while I sat there sick. Kids in wheelchairs, kids with infections, kids who grew 2 inches but lost the ability to run. "Chase would do it," Mr. Gilgy said, "if he were short." "I wouldn't," I said firmly. First time I directly contradicted them, the room went cold. "Then you'll convince Eugene it's necessary," Mrs. Gilgy replied. "Or you can go back where we found you." That night, Eugene came to my room with a syringe. Black market HGH he'd bought with money from selling his anime collection. His hands shook as he prepped the injection. "Maybe if I grow an inch, they'll cancel the surgery," he said. I couldn't watch him destroy himself. I grabbed the needle, flushed it down the toilet. He didn't fight me, just sat on my bed and said, "They're right, you know. I am broken." "You're not broken," I told him. "They are." But he'd already internalized it all. The next week, he started sleeping on boards to improve posture, wore weighted vests under his clothes, hung upside down until blood vessels burst in his eyes. Still 5 feet 4 inches, still not me. The breaking point came at graduation. I'd gotten into state on a full ride. Eugene had secretly applied to art school, got accepted. When the letter arrived, his parents burned it in front of him. "You're going where Chase goes. You're playing basketball. You're majoring in business. You're becoming him." That night, Eugene took matters into his own hands, mixed growth hormones with whatever else he could find online, triple doses of everything. I found him on his bedroom floor at 3 a.m., convulsing, foam at his mouth. The Gilgys blamed me for not supervising him better. He survived, barely. The cocktail had damaged his liver, his kidneys, stress fractures throughout his bones from the constant hanging. Still 5 feet 4 inches, still Eugene, still not Chase. I left for college carrying guilt heavier than any weight Eugene ever wore. Last I heard, the Gilgys found another clinic, another doctor, another promise. Eugene sent me one text, a photo from a hospital bed, legs in medieval-looking devices. Finally getting the surgery. Maybe now they'll love me like they love you. I stared at that text for hours, the medieval devices, his broken message about love. My hands shook as I packed a bag, threw it in my car, and drove through the night back home. The house looked the same from outside. Perfect lawn, perfect paint, perfect lie. I used my key, stepped inside to silence. No usual morning chaos of Eugene's forced exercises. No barked commands from the kitchen, just emptiness. I found Mrs. Gilgy in the living room, organizing medical receipts into color-coded folders. She glanced up, unsurprised. Her hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless at 6 a.m. Everything about her screamed control. She set down her pen carefully. I noticed new charts on the wall behind her, height projections, recovery timelines, photos of other kids post-surgery, standing tall with dead eyes. I dropped my bag, moved toward Eugene's room. She stood, blocked my path. Her perfume was the same vanilla scent from years of forced family dinners. The smell made me nauseous. She smiled, that practiced smile I'd seen 1,000 times, the one she wore while destroying her son. I stepped around her. She grabbed my arm, nails digging through my shirt. I pulled free, kept walking. Eugene's room had transformed into a medical ward, hospital bed, fourth stands, prescription bottles covering every surface, and Eugene, unconscious, legs encased in metal frames with pins drilled through bone. His face was swollen from medications, arms bruised from IVs. The machines beeped steadily, monitoring vitals while his parents monitored their investment. I moved closer, saw the surgery notes on his nightstand. Bilateral tibial lengthening, complications during procedure, extended recovery time. Mr. Gilgy appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand like any normal morning. He wore his weekend polo, pressed khakis, the uniform of suburban success hiding suburban horror. He sipped his coffee, studied me. I recognized that calculating look, the same one he'd worn while measuring our heights, while forcing Eugene to swallow pills, while burning his art school acceptance letter. He set down his mug on Eugene's dresser, next to anime figures Eugene hadn't sold yet, probably kept them hidden. Small rebellions in a war he was losing. I checked Eugene's breathing, shallow but steady. His fingers twitched slightly. The pain medications weren't enough. Even unconscious, his body was fighting the torture they'd paid someone to inflict. Mrs. Gilgy entered with a folder, medical waivers, consent forms, Eugene's shaky signature on every page, dated the day after I'd left for college, the day they'd had him to themselves again. She spread the papers across Eugene's bed, careful not to disturb his legs. Each form was highlighted, annotated. They'd researched every risk, every complication, decided it was worth it, decided he was worth breaking. I gathered the papers, crumpled them. She made a small sound of protest. Mr. Gilgy stepped forward. I threw the papers in the trash, turned back to Eugene. His eyes fluttered open, pupils dilated from pain meds, but he recognized me. His mouth moved, no sound. I leaned closer. He was trying to say my name. I squeezed his hand gently. His fingers were cold, skin papery from dehydration. The 4 wasn't enough. He needed real care, not this basement butcher shop recovery ward. Mr. Gilgy moved to the machines, checking settings, acting like a concerned father. The performance made me sick. He'd probably watched YouTube videos on post-surgical care, convinced himself he was qualified. Eugene's eyes tracked to his father, then back to me. Fear, even drugged, even broken. He was terrified. I squeezed his hand again. A promise. I wasn't leaving him this time. Mrs. Gilgy retrieved new papers from her folder. Recovery schedules, physical therapy plans, basketball training to start in 6 months. They still believed they could transform him. Still believed I was their blueprint. She pointed to specific dates, exercises, explained how Eugene would gain 3 inches, maybe 4, how he'd finally be tall enough for basketball scholarships, how he'd transfer to my school, join my team, become me. I watched Eugene's face as she talked. Each word was another weight on his chest. Even with metal through his bones, they were adding more pressure, more expectations, more ways to fail them. His legs were already showing signs of infection, red streaks along the incision sites, swelling that didn't match the post-op timeline. They'd gone to a cheap clinic, gotten a cheap doctor, and now Eugene was paying the price. I pulled out my phone, started documenting photos of the equipment, the medications, his condition. Mrs. Gilgy tried to stop me. I kept shooting. I wonder what kind of parents measure their kids like science projects and take notes on how someone holds a fork. The way they treated Eugene like he was broken just for being himself makes me curious about their own childhoods. This whole blueprint thing, evidence, protection, proof of what they'd done. Mr. Gilgy grabbed for my phone. I pulled back, kept it out of reach. He wasn't used to me fighting back. None of us were. But Eugene needed someone to fight for him. They started talking rapidly, explaining, justifying, how this was for Eugene's own good, how he'd thank them later, how I'd understand when I had kids. The same speeches they'd given for years, polished and practiced. I ignored them, focused on Eugene. His breathing was getting shallower. The machines showed elevated heart rate, rising temperature. His body was rejecting everything they'd forced on it, just like always. I called 911. Mrs. Gilgy lunged for my phone. I turned away, gave the address, described Eugene's condition, mentioned the unlicensed surgery, the basement recovery, the infection spreading through his legs. Mr. Gilgy ran to the window, watching for ambulances. Mrs. Gilgy started hiding prescription bottles, shoving papers into drawers, their perfect facade cracking under pressure. Eugene squeezed my hand weakly. His eyes were clearer now, fighting through the medication fog. He mouthed something. I leaned close. Thank you, he whispered. The sirens grew louder. The Gilgys grew more frantic. 17 years of control slipping away in minutes. They'd built their whole identity around fixing Eugene. Without that project, who were they? Paramedics burst in, took one look at the setup, and called for backup. Real doctors, real equipment, real help. They stabilized Eugene, prepared him for transport, asked questions the Gilgys couldn't answer honestly. I rode with Eugene to the hospital, held his hand while they examined him properly, watched real doctors shake their heads at the hack job surgery, listened to discussions about permanent damage, emergency intervention, child protective services. Eugene was admitted immediately. Proper IV fluids, proper pain management, proper antibiotics for the infection that could have killed him. The Gilgys arrived later, tried to take control. Hospital security kept them in the waiting room. A social worker interviewed me. Then Eugene, once he was stable enough. Then the Gilgys, separately. The stories didn't match. The evidence was clear. Years of medical abuse documented in Eugene's body. I stayed by Eugene's bed that first night. He drifted in and out of consciousness, but seemed calmer. No forced exercises, no disappointed sighs. Just healing, just being Eugene. The infection was worse than it looked. The surgery had been botched from the start. Bones cut wrong, pins placed poorly. Healing would take months, if it happened at all. They might need to reverse everything just to save his legs. I called my college, explained the situation. Emergency family leave. They understood. I set up my laptop in Eugene's room, attended classes remotely, wasn't leaving him alone with them again. The Gilgys tried visiting, brought Eugene's favorite foods, which weren't actually his favorites, brought basketball magazines he'd never read, brought promises of better doctors, better procedures, still trying to fix what wasn't broken. Hospital staff monitored their visits, noted how Eugene's vitals spiked when they entered, how he gripped my hand tighter, how his healing slowed on days they stayed too long. The evidence kept building. Eugene started talking more as the infection cleared, told me about the years I'd been gone, the escalating pressure, the daily measurements, the supplements that made him sick, the exercises that damaged his joints, the constant comparisons to me. He showed me hidden sketchbooks the nurses had retrieved from his room. Beautiful artwork, manga style but unique. His own vision, his own talent, everything the Gilgys had tried to erase because I couldn't draw. We talked about the future, real future, not their plans, his dreams. Art school was still possible. The acceptance they'd burned was just paper. His talent was still there, waiting. Still Eugene, still enough. The social worker built her case. Medical records, interview transcripts, years of documented abuse disguised as parenting. The Gilgys hired lawyers, fought every accusation, but Eugene's body told the truth they'd spent years denying. I testified about what I'd witnessed, the forced supplements, the dangerous procedures, the psychological torture of constant comparison, how they'd used me as a weapon against their own son, how I'd failed to protect him. Eugene testified too, eventually, quietly, honestly, about wanting to please them, about believing he was broken, about the pain of never being enough, about choosing surgery because maybe, finally, they'd love him like they loved me. The truth was simpler and sadder. They'd never loved either of us. We were projects, trophies, evidence of their parenting skills. Eugene was their failure to fix. I was their success to replicate. Neither of us were their sons. The court restricted their access, mandated therapy, ordered them to pay for Eugene's medical care, his real recovery. They fought every step, still convinced they were right, still convinced Eugene needed fixing. Eugene's legs slowly healed. The pins came out. The scars remained. He'd gained maybe an inch, but lost so much more. Mobility, trust, years of his life. But he'd gained something too. Freedom. I helped him apply to art schools again, built his portfolio, wrote recommendation letters, watched him create without fear, without shame, watched him become who he'd always been underneath their pressure. The Gilgys sent letters, apologies that weren't apologies, explanations that explained nothing, promises to do better while insisting they'd done nothing wrong. We didn't respond. Some bridges should stay burned. Eugene got accepted to 3 art programs, full scholarship to 1, not because he was tall, not because he played basketball, because he was talented, because he was enough, because he was Eugene. I went back to finish college. Eugene started art school. We texted daily, shared our lives without measurement, without comparison. Brothers by choice now, not by their design. The Gilgys didn't accept defeat easily. They showed up at Eugene's dorm 3 weeks into his first semester, armed with medical journals and printouts about reversible procedures. I got the call from Eugene at 2 a.m. His voice voice shaking. They'd cornered him outside the art building after his evening class. I drove 4 hours through the night, found them in the parking lot. Mrs. Gilgy had Eugene backed against his car while Mr. Gilgy blocked his escape route. They were showing him photos of other students who'd undergone additional surgeries. Success stories, they called them. Kids who'd gained 5-6 inches. Kids who'd gone on to play college sports. Eugene stood there frozen, clutching his art portfolio like a shield. The same terrified expression from years of forced measurements. I parked behind Mr. Gilgy's car, trapping them in. They turned, surprised. Hadn't expected me to show up so fast. Mrs. Gilgy recovered first, switching to her practiced smile. She explained they'd found a new doctor. A real one this time. Board certified. Safe procedures. Insurance would even cover part of it. All Eugene had to do was take a medical leave from school. I moved between them and Eugene, felt him grab the back of my jacket. His hands were trembling. Mr. Gilgy stepped forward, that calculating look back in his eyes. He mentioned they still had legal guardianship until Eugene turned 21. Still had the right to make medical decisions. Eugene dropped his portfolio, pencils and sketches scattered across the asphalt. His latest project, a graphic novel about two brothers, one tall, one short, both learning to be themselves. The Gilgys didn't even glance at the scattered artwork. I helped Eugene gather his drawings while the Gilgys kept talking, explaining how art school was a waste, how Eugene could transfer to my university, how they'd already spoken to the basketball coach about walk-on tryouts, how height was still fixable. Campus security arrived, summoned by another student who'd witnessed the confrontation. The Gilgys shifted to concerned parent mode instantly, just visiting their son, just offering support, just wanting what's best. The officers escorted them off campus anyway. Eugene couldn't stop shaking in my car afterward. He showed me the emails they'd been sending, daily messages about his mistake, photos of tall, successful men, statistics about height and income, reminders that he was still broken, still fixable, still not enough. I stayed the weekend, slept on his dorm floor, met his roommate, an aspiring animator named Theo, who'd been helping Eugene feel normal. Theo was 5 feet 6 inches, successful, confident, living proof that height didn't determine worth. The Gilgys would have hated him. Eugene showed me around campus, the art studios where he spent most nights, the gallery where his work was already displayed, the coffee shop where classmates gathered to critique each other's projects, a world where his talent mattered more than his height. But the Gilgys' presence lingered. Eugene flinched whenever tall students walked by, avoided the gym entirely, ate alone rather than risk comments about his size. The physical scars on his legs were healing, but the psychological wounds ran deeper. I found a lawyer through my university's legal aid, explored options for protecting Eugene. The guardianship issue was real but challengeable. We needed documentation of the abuse, medical records from the botched surgery, testimony from doctors about the damage done. The Gilgys escalated their tactics, started calling Eugene's professors, expressing concern about his mental state, suggested he needed medical intervention, tried to paint his rejection of further procedures as evidence of psychological problems. Classic manipulation, but effective. Eugene's academic advisor called him in, worried. The Gilgys had been persuasive. Their lawyer shopping game is about as subtle as their parenting skills, which is to say, not at all. Nothing says loving parents quite like stalking your kid at art school with a briefcase full of bone-stretching brochures. Concerned parents wanting their son to get help. The advisor suggested Eugene consider counseling, maybe medical leave, maybe reconnecting with family. The system was working against us. I started documenting everything. Saved voicemails where Mrs. Gilgy alternated between threats and promises. Recorded Mr. Gilgy showing up at Eugene's part-time job, pressuring his manager about giving Eugene time off for medical procedures. Built a case file of harassment. Eugene threw himself into his art, channeling the pain into creation. His graphic novel evolved, became darker. The short brother in his story faced monsters that wore parental faces. The tall brother fought beside him. Together they were stronger than apart. The Gilgys found Eugene's therapist, the one he'd started seeing for anxiety. They convinced her they were concerned parents, shared selective history, painted Eugene's resistance as rebellion, suggested his art was escapism. The therapist started questioning Eugene's choices. Eugene stopped going to therapy, stopped trusting adults who claimed to help, started isolating himself even more. I watched him shrinking into himself, despite gaining confidence in his art. The Gilgys were winning through persistence. They showed up at his dorm again, this time with forms, power of attorney documents, medical consent papers, transfer applications to my university, all pre-filled, just needing signatures. They'd even arranged meetings with orthopedic surgeons near my campus. Eugene ran, literally fled the building, left them standing in his room, called me from a park bench, hyperventilating. I talked him through breathing exercises while driving to him again. 4 hours each way was becoming routine. His roommate Theo had confronted the Gilgys in Eugene's absence, told them to leave, threatened to call security again. They'd responded by questioning Theo's influence, suggesting inappropriate relationships, planting seeds of doubt with the residence administration. I helped Eugene file a restraining order. The lawyer walked us through the process. We submitted evidence of harassment, medical records showing the damage from previous procedures. The judge granted a temporary order. Small victory, but something. The Gilgys hired their own lawyer, fought the restraining order, claimed parental rights, argued Eugene was making dangerous decisions, pointed to his history of self-harm, conveniently omitting their role in causing it. The legal system moved slowly. Eugene's art professor noticed his distress, pulled him aside after class, offered support without judgment, became the first adult in years to see Eugene's worth beyond his height. She helped him enter his work in competitions. His talent started gaining recognition. The Gilgys tried new tactics, sent Eugene's old basketball teammates to visit, kids who'd been forced to practice with him. They came with messages about missed opportunities, about how height opened doors, about how Eugene was wasting his potential. But something had shifted in Eugene. The art world's acceptance gave him strength. He showed the teammates his portfolio, explained his passion. Some understood, others left confused. But Eugene didn't crumble, didn't apologize for being himself. I started getting calls too. The Gilgys trying to manipulate me back into their web, reminding me of the life they'd given me, the opportunities, the education, suggesting I owed them Eugene's compliance, threatening to reveal I'd been a group home kid. They didn't understand that wasn't shameful to me anymore. I'd earned my scholarships, built my own success. Their money had come with strings that nearly strangled Eugene. I told them to reveal whatever they wanted. My teammates already knew my history. Eugene won his first art competition. Small, local, but significant. Prize money he used for better supplies. Recognition that validated his path. The Gilgys found out, showed up at the award ceremony, stood in the back, taking photos, claiming credit. The restraining order hearing arrived. Eugene testified about years of abuse, the forced procedures, the psychological torture, the constant message that he wasn't enough. His voice stayed steady, even when the Gilgys' lawyer questioned his mental stability. I testified next, detailed what I'd witnessed, the supplements that made him sick, the exercises that damaged his growth plates, the surgery that nearly culled him, how they'd used me as a weapon against their own son. The judge listened carefully. The Gilgys testified last, painted themselves as devoted parents, claimed they'd only wanted to help Eugene succeed, showed financial records of money spent on treatments, made it sound like love. The performance was convincing to those who didn't know know better. The judge extended the temporary order but didn't make it permanent, suggested family counseling instead, compromise. The Gilgeys smiled, knowing they'd won a partial victory. Eugene's shoulders sagged. The system had failed him again, but Eugene surprised everyone, announced he was legally changing his name, dropping Gilgey, taking his mother's maiden name instead. Beatrice. Eugene Beatrice. A small rebellion that meant everything. The Gilgeys couldn't force him to carry their name. They retaliated by cutting off the medical payments they'd been court-ordered to make. Eugene's ongoing treatment for the damage they'd caused now fell to him. Student insurance covered some. He took extra shifts at work to cover the rest. I helped where I could, sent money from my part-time job, connected him with disability services at his school, helped him apply for medical grants. We became experts at navigating systems meant to help people the Gilgeys had broken. Eugene's graphic novel caught a publisher's attention. Small press, but legitimate. They offered a modest advance, enough to cover medical bills for a few months. The Gilgeys tried to claim rights to the work, arguing they'd supported his education. The lawyer shut that down quickly. Eugene had created the work at college, with his own supplies, on his own time. The Gilgeys had no claim, but they kept trying, filing nuisance motions that cost money to fight. Death by 1,000 legal cuts. Eugene's health deteriorated from stress. The old fractures ached constantly. His kidneys, damaged by years of supplements, required monitoring. Some days he could barely walk to class, but he kept creating. Art became his lifeline. The Gilgeys started showing up at my games, sitting in the family section, wearing team colors, playing proud parents to their successful adopted son, using me for image rehabilitation, making connections with other parents, building their narrative. I couldn't ban them without causing drama, but I stopped acknowledging them, didn't wave, didn't smile for their photos, gave my extra tickets to Eugene instead. He'd sit in the student section, sketchbook in hand, drawing the energy of the crowd. Spring break arrived. Eugene didn't go home, couldn't go home, stayed in his empty dorm, working on his book. I drove down to spend the week with him. We explored the city, museums, galleries, places where height didn't matter. The Gilgeys escalated again, filed for conservatorship, claimed Eugene was mentally incompetent, unable to make medical decisions, needed supervision, used his history of self-harm as evidence, twisted his artistic focus into obsession, made creativity sound like illness. The legal battle intensified. Depositions, psychological evaluations, medical examinations. Eugene subjected to scrutiny that reinforced every insecurity the Gilgeys had planted. Each evaluation, another measurement of his worth, another way he might fail to measure up. But Eugene had allies now. His professor testified about his talent. Theo described him as a capable roommate. The publisher spoke about his professionalism. Even some former teammates admitted the Gilgeys had pushed too hard. The truth was emerging. I took a semester off to support Eugene through the proceedings. My coach understood. Family came first. The Gilgeys tried to use this against us, claimed I was enabling Eugene's delusions, suggested inappropriate dependence, tried to poison every pure thing. Eugene's lawyer found other families the Gilgeys had helped, other short kids they'd pressured into procedures. Most were too scared to testify, but one came forward, showed her scars, described the promises that turned to threats. The pattern became clear. The Gilgeys' reputation in their community started cracking. Neighbors whispered. Their church friends asked questions. The perfect family image they'd cultivated for years was crumbling. They blamed Eugene for the destruction, as if truth was his fault. Eugene finished his graphic novel, dedicated it to everyone who was told they weren't enough. The publisher fast-tracked production. Early reviews were positive. Orders started coming in. Success on his own terms. Validation the Gilgeys couldn't control. They tried one last manipulation. Showed up at Eugene's dorm with his grandmother, his real grandmother, who he hadn't seen in years. She was crying, begging him to reconcile, to forgive, to come home, to be a family again. Eugene wavered. Family loyalty ran deep, even in broken families. But then his grandmother mentioned the new doctor they'd found, the revolutionary procedure, how Eugene could still be fixed, still be tall, still be worthy. The manipulation was generational. He asked them to leave, quietly, firmly, without cruelty, but without weakness. They'd taught him he was broken. He'd learned he was whole. They'd measured his worth in inches. He'd found it in imagination. The gap between them was unbridgeable. The conservatorship hearing approached. Eugene prepared his final testimony, not about what they'd done to his body, about what they'd tried to do to his spirit, about learning to love himself despite their lessons, about choosing art over their artificial standards. Something feels off about how easily these parents keep finding Eugene's private information, his therapist, his dorm, even his workplace. Makes me wonder who's been feeding them details about his life all along. I prepared my own statement about the brother I'd found in their biological son, about watching brilliance dimmed by arbitrary expectations, about the courage it took for Eugene to choose himself, about the family we'd built from shared survival. The Gilgeys made one final offer through their lawyer. Drop the restraining order, submit to family counseling, let them back into his life. In exchange, they'd drop the conservatorship petition, pay for his remaining medical care, support his art career, conditional love with familiar strings. Eugene refused, even if it meant more legal battles, more medical debt, more uncertainty. He'd rather struggle free than prosper in chains. The Gilgeys couldn't understand. They'd never seen him as more than a project, never recognized the person beneath their plans. The hearing was set for next month. Win or lose, Eugene had already claimed his victory. He was Eugene Beatrice, artist, 5'4", scarred but not broken, talented beyond measure, worth more than they'd ever imagined, free from their blueprint, finally, fully himself. The conservatorship hearing arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. I picked Eugene up from his dorm at dawn, watched him adjust his tie with shaking hands. He'd lost weight since the Gilgeys' last visit, dark circles, permanent fixtures under his eyes. The graphic novel advance had covered his medical bills, but stress was taking its own toll. The courthouse steps felt endless. Eugene gripped his portfolio tighter with each step, knuckles white against the leather. Inside, the Gilgeys sat with their lawyer, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed. They'd brought character witnesses from their church, their country club, their perfect suburban circle. Eugene's lawyer reviewed our evidence one last time in the hallway. Medical records documenting years of damage, voicemails and emails showing harassment, testimony from professors and doctors. The other victim who'd agreed to testify sat nearby, her own scars hidden beneath long sleeves. The judge entered, and proceedings began. The Gilgeys' lawyer painted a picture of devoted parents trying to help their troubled son. He presented Eugene's self-harm history, his isolation, his obsession with art, made normal teenage struggles sound like mental illness requiring intervention. Our lawyer countered with facts, the unlicensed surgeries, the forced medications, the psychological manipulation disguised as parenting. Eugene sat beside me, hands folded, fighting not to react as they dissected his life for strangers to judge. The other victim testified first. Her voice barely carried across the courtroom as she described the Gilgeys' help when she was 15, the promises that turned to threats, the procedures that left her with chronic pain, the way they'd convinced her parents she needed fixing. Eugene's professors testified next. His art teacher described his talent, his dedication, his growth since escaping home. The gallery owner who displayed his work spoke about his professionalism. Theo explained how Eugene managed daily life perfectly well without parental supervision. Medical experts detailed the damage to Eugene's body. Kidney function compromised by years of supplements. Bones weakened by constant stress. Growth plates damaged beyond repair. Each injury a testament to the Gilgees' version of love. During lunch recess, the Gilgees approached us in the hallway. Mrs. Gilgee reached for Eugene, but he stepped back. Mr. Gilgee started speaking about forgiveness, about family, about second chances. Eugene turned away, walked to the water fountain, left them talking to empty air. The afternoon brought Eugene's testimony. He spoke quietly but clearly about growing up measured against me, about the supplements that made him vomit, about hanging from doorways until his shoulders dislocated, about believing he was broken because they told him so every day. He opened his portfolio, showed the judge his artwork, pages from the graphic novel about two brothers, the evolution from dark, painful early sketches to hopeful recent work, art as evidence of healing, of finding himself despite their efforts to erase him. I testified last, described watching them destroy Eugene while using me as the weapon, the guilt of being their perfect son while Eugene suffered, how they'd threatened to send me back to foster care if I didn't help break him, how leaving for college felt like abandoning him to wolves. The Gilgees took the stand together, a united front of suburban respectability. They spoke about wanting the best for Eugene, about the money they'd spent on treatments, about their confusion at his rejection. Their performance was polished, practiced, almost believable if you didn't know the truth. Under cross-examination, cracks appeared. They couldn't explain the unlicensed doctors, couldn't justify the forced procedures. When asked about burning Eugene's art school acceptance, Mrs. Gilgee claimed it was to protect him from unrealistic dreams. The judge's expression hardened. Character witnesses for the Gilgees testified about what wonderful people they were, pillars of the community, generous donors, perfect parents to their adopted son Chase. None of them had seen what happened behind closed doors. None of them knew the cost of that perfection. Our lawyer presented the final evidence, a video Eugene had secretly recorded years ago. The Gilgees screaming at him for being short, forcing pills down his throat. Mr. Gilgee holding him down while Mrs. Gilgee measured his height, both of them calling him a failure. Eugene hadn't watched it since recording it. He stared at his hands while it played. Closing arguments focused on competency versus control. The Gilgees' lawyer argued Eugene needed guidance, protection from his own poor choices. Our lawyer argued Eugene needed protection from the people who'd spent years breaking him. The judge took everything under advisement. We waited in the hallway while she deliberated. Eugene sketched nervously in a small notebook, drawing the courthouse ceiling, the exit signs, anything but the Gilgees sitting across from us. I bought him coffee from the vending machine, watched him hold it without drinking. The judge returned after 2 hours. Her decision was methodical, thorough. She found no evidence of Eugene's incompetence, found substantial evidence of medical abuse, denied the conservatorship completely, ordered the Gilgees to maintain distance and continue paying medical expenses as previously ordered. The Gilgees' lawyer immediately mentioned appeal. The judge warned against further harassment, reminded them that criminal charges were still possible, that other victims were watching, that their pattern of behavior was now documented in court records. Eugene didn't celebrate, didn't smile, just gathered his portfolio and walked out. The Gilgees tried to follow, but court security intervened. I heard Mrs. Gilgee calling his name as we left, her perfect composure finally cracking. Eugene didn't look back. In the parking lot, Eugene's hands shook too badly to unlock his car. I took his keys, drove while he sat silently. The weight of testimony, of reliving years of abuse in public, settled over him like fog. Victory didn't feel victorious when you'd had to fight for basic human dignity. We stopped at a diner outside town. Eugene ordered tea, held the warm cup without drinking. I watched him process what had happened. Freedom confirmed by law. Parents who would never stop seeing him as broken. A future that was finally, legally, his own. His phone buzzed with messages. The publisher congratulating him. Theo checking in. His art professor offering support. A community the Gilgees couldn't touch, couldn't poison, couldn't control. Eugene read each message without responding. Still processing. The Gilgees' car passed the diner twice, circling, watching, unable to let go even after losing. I suggested we leave, but Eugene shook his head. He was done running, done hiding. They could circle all they wanted. They couldn't touch him anymore. Eugene finally spoke about the future. Graduate school applications, a second graphic novel already outlined, physical therapy to manage the chronic pain, real therapy to process the trauma, steps forward that belonged to him alone. No measurements, no comparisons, just Eugene. I drove him back to campus as evening fell. He'd missed classes, but professors understood. Court dates for abuse survivors were excused absences. Another small victory in a war that shouldn't have needed fighting. Another step toward normal that would never quite be normal. Eugene's dorm felt different when we arrived. Safer. His. Theo had left dinner on his desk, a note about saving his seat in tomorrow's animation class. The Gilgees couldn't enter here, couldn't demand transformations, couldn't measure his worth in inches. Before I left, Eugene showed me his latest sketches. The brothers in his story were healing too, growing in different directions but staying connected. The tall one learning he wasn't responsible for other people's expectations. The short one discovering strength had nothing to do with height. I hugged him goodbye, felt how thin he'd gotten under the stress. He promised to eat better, sleep more, take care of himself. Promises he could keep now without someone sabotaging every effort, without someone telling him he wasn't worth caring for. The drive back to my campus took 4 hours. I thought about the Gilgees, probably still circling Eugene's dorm, unable to accept defeat. About Eugene, finally free but carrying scars that would never fully heal. About myself, the weapon they'd crafted, and the brother I'd chosen to be instead. My phone rang as I reached my apartment. Eugene, sounding stronger. He'd submitted his graduate school applications, sent his portfolio to 3 more publishers, made a therapy appointment for next week. Small steps, but his own. No one else's blueprint to follow. The Gilgees sent one last email that night to both of us, about forgiveness and family and second chances, about how we'd regret this someday, about doors that were always open. Eugene forwarded it to his lawyer without reading past the first line. Evidence for the inevitable next battle. I deleted it unread. Some doors should stay closed. Some bridges should stay burned. Some people should stay in the past where they can't hurt you anymore. The Gilgees would never understand that, would never stop trying to fix what wasn't broken. Eugene texted me his newest drawing at midnight. The 2 brothers from his story, standing apart but connected, both scarred, both healing, both finally free to be exactly who they were. No measurements, no comparisons, just 2 kids who'd survived something that should never have happened. I saved the image, put my phone away, tried to focus on my own homework. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Gilgees wouldn't give up easily. Eugene's health would take years to fully address. The trauma would surface in unexpected ways, but tonight we were free. Tonight that was enough. Eugene started posting his art online the next week, building a following, finding his voice, creating beauty from pain. The Gilgees found his accounts, left comments about disappointment and ingratitude. He blocked them without reading, kept creating, kept growing on his own terms. I graduated that spring. Eugene came to the ceremony, sat with my teammates who'd become his friends too. The Gilgees didn't attend. Their perfect adopted son's success meant nothing without their broken biological son to fix. I was just Chase now, not their blueprint. Eugene was just Eugene, not their project. We met monthly after that, coffee shops halfway between our schools, talking about everything accept them. Eugene's art grew stronger, more confident. His health slowly improved with proper care. He walked with a slight limp on bad days, but he walked. He lived. He chose his own path. The Gilgies kept trying. Letters through lawyers, messages through distant relatives, showing up at Eugene's exhibitions until security learned their faces. Each attempt weaker than the last, each rejection firmer. The pattern finally breaking, one boundary at a time. Eugene's second book released to better reviews. A story about healing, about choosing yourself, about brotherhood beyond blood. He dedicated it to everyone still trapped in someone else's blueprint. I kept a signed copy on my shelf, proof that survival was possible, that freedom could be claimed. That broken was just another word for human. Subscribe for more. I'm trying to hit 250,000 by the end of the year.